Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast, the show for women who want to develop a kinder relationship with their body so you can feel healthy, happy, and confident without restricting food, doing torturous exercise, or constantly worrying about the number on the scale. I'm your host, Kim Hagel, size-inclusive fitness specialist and certified non-diet health and life coach specializing in body image. This podcast is here to provide weight-neutral, health at every size aligned information and coaching on sustainable habits and mindset shifts so you can feel your very best in the body you have right now. Let's lace up our runners and go for a walk while we chat. Hey friends, and welcome back to the Power in Motion podcast. This week we're joined by fellow coach Nicola Salmon, who is here to talk to us all about weight-neutral fertility and the stigma that often comes up to folks in larger bodies as they're navigating the fertility journey. Now, before you click off, if this is not something that you have ever experienced, I encourage you to stick around because I think there's insights in this episode that would be relevant to us all, whether we're parents or not, or whether we have ever struggled with fertility or not. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Nicola. Nicola is the leading voice for fat folks seeking fertility support, bringing a unique fat-positive perspective to her work as a fertility coach and author of the groundbreaking book, Fat and Fertile. She's a prominent figure in the world of fat activism, using her platform and expertise to challenge the weight bias and stigmas that exist within the fertility industry and empower those who are often marginalized to take control of their reproductive health with confidence and self-assurance. Through her innovative and evidence-based approach, she helps clients find their own path to wellness, free from diets and body shaming, and encourages them to trust and believe in their ability to conceive. With her expert guidance and compassionate support, Nicola is changing the way people approach fertility. And in this episode, we talked about all of those things. We talked about how weight bias and stigma affects folks in larger bodies in both trying to access fertility care and in the risks and so-called complications that are often assigned to folks in larger bodies. Nicola is a researcher at heart, so she has really dug into all of the studies that have been done around fertility and especially around weight and fertility. And she clears up a lot of those myths and misconceptions and talks about the flaws in some of these studies, which really boils down to people in larger bodies often being left out. So the data just simply doesn't exist. Nicola's approach is so compassionate and so unique. And inside this episode, she shares her 4-step process on how folks who exist in larger bodies can support themselves to get the fertility care that they need and to start growing their family right now, if that's what they desire. It's a really empowering, heart-touching episode. I learned a lot myself, and I know that you'll find it informative and enlightening. So please enjoy. Hey, Nicola, welcome to the Power in Motion podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you here today to talk about fertility and how weight stigma enters into that and what folks can do if they're on that journey. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much for thinking of me. I am so glad that we get to reconnect.
Oh, me too. Me too. Yeah. Nicola and I go way back. We were in a mastermind together for weight neutral health professionals. So it's been a while since we chatted, but I'm really glad to reconnect too. One thing I have noticed in doing this show and speaking to lots of people is that generally speaking, we all have a personal experience that leads us to doing the kind of work that we're doing. And you're nodding your head, so I can tell this is true for you too. Would you tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you to be doing the work that you do now?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's so true. It's really what connects you to the work, isn't it? So for me, it goes way back. So this was over 20 years ago now. I was diagnosed with a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. Now, it's quite common to hear it talked about now. Like, it's a condition that affects a lot of people. But back when I was like 16 years old, we didn't really have the internet. We didn't have many resources. So I didn't really know what it was. All I had was the information that the doctor gave me. And that was that it was like a hormonal and metabolic condition, that I'd need to lose weight in order to like manage it. To regulate my menstrual cycles, which was the main symptom I had, was just to go on the pill. So the oral contraceptive pill. and also I wouldn't be able to get pregnant. So a lot of information, not a lot of helpful information to help me navigate that at quite a, a young age, a tender age, to be told big news like that. So yeah, I kind of grew up with this idea that my body was broken, like there was something wrong with me. I had to make my body smaller in order to make it better or to fix it in some way. And also that, I would likely never become a parent. And because of that diagnosis, because of that condition, I grew up with a massive interest in fertility, in hormones, in menstrual cycles, which led me to actually becoming a qualified fertility acupuncturist, which was kind of my route into the fertility world. So that was in my mid-20s that I was doing that work. And it was only then that I really learned that what the doctor said is actually a load of rubbish. Just because you're diagnosed with PCOS, that doesn't mean that you can't get pregnant. Obviously, it impacts things like ovulation, it impacts the length of your menstrual cycle, it can impact other things too. But it's definitely not this means you're never going to be able to get pregnant. And actually, for me, when I met my husband and we were starting to try to think about having a family, we got pregnant really easily. And that for me was a big whoa moment, because I was in a big body still. I was still within diet culture at that time. So I'd already told myself that I had to lose weight before I could get pregnant. And that was kind of what I was gearing myself up for. But I had really long regular cycles. I hadn't quote unquote fixed my PCOS, and still we got pregnant. And so that for me was this big seed that it planted of why did they tell me that? Why did I spend all this time thinking that was going to be a problem? And, I'm still fat. So how is this, how is this a thing? How did I get pregnant? And it was when I was pregnant with my first child that I really started to understand what advocacy meant, because I was, treated quite negatively. I was labeled high risk during that pregnancy. I was told I couldn't have the birth choices I wanted to have. So I really had to dig deep and really do a lot of research and advocate for myself to have kind of the choices that I wanted, and to, not scare myself to death through the whole thing, because actually a lot of the research is sensationalized. A lot of it isn't based in any current evidence bases. And so the more I kind of dived into it, the more I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why was I told this? And why are we led to believe this? So that is really what planted the seeds for me. So alongside kind of my own education, when I decided to quit dieting, I was coming to terms with the fact that the fertility industry is so problematic when it comes to telling people to lose weight, telling people to diet, and realizing, how much harm I've done in that process of supporting folks with fertility. So it was a long kind of time getting there, and it's taken me a long time to unlearn a lot of the stuff that I learned when I was training, and figure out, what it means to me. But yeah, I'm very glad that I'm where I'm at now, in terms of both growing my family and also kind of the work that I get to do, and learning more about how problematic not only the healthcare industry is, but the fertility industry in particular.
Yeah. And I'm sure that the folks out there that are walking a similar path to what you walked are very grateful too, that you're doing this work and showing them that there's another option, right? Because I think so many are told the same things that you were told. And this is something we've been exploring with lots of guests here on the show lately, about medical weight stigma. And I'd love to hear your opinion. Why do you think this is just the default? You must lose weight. It's because of your size that you're having these problems, and you must lose weight in this situation before you get pregnant. Why do you think that happens?
Oh, it's such a big question. And I don't think there's one right answer. I think that it is just I think doctors and healthcare providers, they all go into the field wanting to do the best for people, right? I really truly believe that they really think they're doing their best for them. But I think that the fact that we believe that fat is bad is so deeply rooted within our culture, our society, from so many different directions, that I feel like it takes a real active participation with healthcare providers to begin to dismantle some of that. So obviously there's kind of the roots of racism and the roots of colonialism and religion. There's so many different things that have influenced and shaped the way that we feel about our bodies and about food and about like how we talk about all of those things. And I think it's just so unfortunate that the medical system is still, you know, really rooted in patriarchy, really got so many kind of racist roots to it that, you know, until we can really explore that and analyze it for what it is, like you can't almost take it out of those roots. It's so impossible to like figure out and dismantle all of the different parts and where they come, like especially gynecology. Like there is so much racism in gynecology. A lot of like I think it is what they call like the father of modern gynecology. I don't remember their name, but they did so many like experiments on Black women without their consent, without, you know, proper pain control. And so much of our like current understanding around gynecology and around fertility is based on that premise, on that practice. And it's abhorrent. It means that so many Black people within, you know, both the UK where I'm from and the US, or, you know, in Canada, in North America, like experience so much poorer care and, you know, increased mortality rates through gynecology and birth and fertility. It's a wild space to be in. But yeah, until we make big changes, it's hard to know, like, where do we go from here?
And that's just it. And I think your answer highlights just how complex and nuanced this all is. Like, it doesn't boil down to one simple bit of misinformation, right? Like, there's so much impacting this conversation. So, in your research, as you started to learn more about fertility, what did you find out? Like, is there any truth to the things you were being told, that being in a larger body makes it harder to get pregnant or puts you at higher risk? Like, what's the truth?
And I think the truth is, again, it's complicated and nuanced, but the best way that I can explain it is that so much of the science and the evidence that underpins how we practice fertility care, how doctors practice support in helping people get pregnant, it is done by researchers who are also in this diet culture soup, who are also influenced by the history, but also the current climate where so many pharmaceutical companies are promoting weight loss because they sell, you know, the meds. Like this is so prevalent right now. And they are doing their research with the underlying foundation and bias of fat equals bad. Therefore, you know, this is going to like be the lens on which I see the results of this research. So when I go back and look at that research now with a weight neutral lens, kind of as the way that I see it, I can see such big flaws in how they talk about these things and the decisions they're making about the experiments and about how they're like sharing that information with the world. Because we know we live in a world where it's all about like the highlights, right? Like it's the headlines. That's what we take away from a lot of the research. And for example, like one fact or myth that's kind of well documented in the fertility world is that it takes fat folks longer to get pregnant. Now, the research that is based on there's like maybe like 2 studies that show this. And the time that it takes that they found in those studies is like 2 to 3 months longer. Like it is not a big deal, but also like none of that research takes into account how fat folks are treated. So the weight stigma that they face when they go to the doctor, the fact that they might not even want to go to their doctor because of negative experiences they've had in the past. The fact that their doctor will turn them away and say, oh, come back in, you know, when you've lost this weight, and they don't get the appropriate tests, the appropriate treatment to see if there's anything else underlying going on. The fact that, you know, tests, that treatments are built and designed around thin people's bodies. So when a fat person wants to access fertility care or fertility treatments, it's not built for their body. So they have a different response to it. They may need a higher dose of drugs. They may need, you know, a longer time to go through that process. But because we're assuming that a thin person is the norm, when fat people are going through those processes and those treatments and they respond differently, we're seeing that as that they're the problem, not that hasn't been designed for them. So there's so many layers to it. But at the end of the day, it is really just the fact that all of the research really points to it's that we haven't been considered. We haven't been thought about when these processes, these designs, these things are thinking about. And we our experiences are never considered. We're not thought about in that way. And fact that we've probably been on diets in our past, again, never considered, it's never thought about the impact of that. And when we look at medicine across kind of a bigger, broader picture, we see that these kind of risks are increased by a similar amount across all the different like modalities. And actually what would perfectly explain that is just the weight stigma and the weight bias that fat folks face when they're trying to access any form of healthcare.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, I think a large part of the risk, in quotes, that they assign to folks in a larger weight or higher weight comes from the fact that they tend not to access medical care because of the way that they're treated, right? So they don't have the same level of care as someone in a smaller body because they're afraid of how they're going to be spoken to, right? So I think that elevates the risk right there.
Absolutely. And we know that, if they're thinking and worrying about that, that could impact their stress response. That will increase the levels of stress in their body. We know that things like increased adrenaline and cortisol can impact hormones. We know it can impact so many different functions of the body. So there's 100 different ways that you can see that actually the way that we're treated as fat folks can impact, can have an impact on the risk of different things occurring.
Yeah. It's so complex. Like, there's so many layers.
So many pieces in the puzzle. And it's, there's no studies that will look at this stuff because there is no funding. Like, there's nobody who, there's no big weight neutral companies that are wanting to fund this kind of research. If only.
Well, that's not profitable, right? Like, I'm sure the diet industry wants to make money, and I'm sure they're involved in fertility care in some way too, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's who's making money off of this.
Yeah. Oh my God. If you look up, if you Google fertility diet, there is so much rubbish out there.
Really?
There's so many people making such a lot of money. Even one of the biggest clinics in America, their director, so their founder, has a diet book about keto.
Wow.
Yeah.
While you're trying to conceive.
For IVF people, for people going through IVF, they're recommending keto. And keto, I think it was designed for epileptic children. That's the
originally, but now everybody should be on it, apparently.
But there's no research, no evidence, there's no, nothing to support it. Yet, we have these people who are, really influential within the fertility and the IVF spaces in the US, and they are actively promoting, really harmful, non-evidence-based diets for folks.
Yeah. And that was going to be my next question is there any evidence that following a keto diet improves your chance of getting pregnant? Of course not.
You'll be surprised or not that there is no evidence to support any form of intentional weight loss. And in fact, there's a couple of really good studies that have come out over the past couple of years that show weight loss, dieting, any form of lifestyle intervention has absolutely no impact on fertility outcomes.
Interesting. Can you just say that again for the people in the back?
It doesn't work.
Wow. Okay. So we're being told to lose weight, and yet there's nothing that shows that doing so will improve your chances.
Yeah. And these are big, thousands and thousands of people in these studies, really good studies, really good quality. And there's just no evidence to support that these help. Yeah. We know that that's not going to filter through for a long time, but people are being impacted today by the decisions that doctors, healthcare providers, fertility doctors and specialists are making.
And that's the sad part is it doesn't filter through, right? And not just in fertility, but in so many areas of health, people are told you have to lose weight to get better. Yeah. And then there's across the board, there's not a lot of evidence that losing weight improves whatever the health condition is, but that's not the part they're sharing, right? It's just you have to lose weight.
Yeah, it's like a judgment, right? We still have, as a culture, it's accepted that we can judge people based on their body size, and we assume that it's their fault. We make so many assumptions and so many judgments on people, and actually, if we could just let that go and just accept that we're all human, we all deserve as much care and support in whatever healthcare field that we need. And there should be enough for everybody, right? Like,
Yeah.
there should be access to healthcare. That should be a basic human right for
Yeah.
everybody to get the healthcare they needed. Then I think it would be a much better place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there's a pervasive belief that being in a larger body is a personal choice and that you've done this to yourself, right? And if you want to choose to get pregnant, then you got to choose to get thin. And like none of that's true, right? Like, and even if it were a choice, like it should be a fully acceptable choice to make.
Absolutely. Like it should be a choice, right? But at the moment, people don't have that choice.
Yeah.
People in bigger bodies don't have the option to get fertility care that they need, like because there are so many BMI barriers around accessing like things like IVF. And for some folks, they don't have any other options, like if they've got specific healthcare conditions or if they're with a partner that has specific healthcare conditions. Sometimes like that is their only option. And if you have BMI restrictions around that, then they're left with nothing. Like they can either travel, hundreds of miles to find a clinic that will help them, or they have to kind of go through, really often, difficult weight loss strategies to try and figure out how they're going to lose the weight to be able to work with a clinic closer to them. And that's if they've got the money available, because again, this stuff is really expensive and so much of it isn't covered on insurance. Or, we have the NHS in the UK, but again, like there is a very poor provision in terms of care for, even for people without BMI restrictions, like it's still very limited.
Gotcha. Okay, so all of this can leave a person feeling pretty hopeless and disempowered. Where does someone like you come in? How do you empower the folks that you work with to take control of their reproductive health and get the care that they need and hopefully get the results that they want?
So there's a few ways that I like to work with folks, and I've done this for, I think, 2024, 6 years now. So I've worked with a lot of people trying to figure out exactly what's going to help. And I kind of narrowed it down to like 4 main areas. So the first is really looking at how can you support your health without weight loss and diets? Because so many of us, we don't know what that looks like, because all of our quote unquote health adventures through life have always been with the sole purpose of making our body smaller. So it's about looking at, what can we do that's going to be helpful, that's not going to involve restriction, not going to involve dieting. Like, how can we take care of our bodies without, diet culture breathing down on it? The next is around advocacy. So really helping folks figure out what kind of healthcare team they need, what support they need, how they can access that, looking at their options, where they live and what they're doing, so that they can really get the support that they need. The next one is around trust. So really, for so many folks in bigger bodies, and especially through fertility stuff, they have this underlying sense that their body is broken and it's not working for them, and it is, never going to do the thing that they really wanted to do. So it's about really rebuilding that relationship and that trust with their body, so they can be working together on the same page. And then we do a lot of work around beliefs. So around believing that their body is capable of this, because we have been absolutely conditioned to believe that our body will, will not be able to do this. It will never do this. It's impossible for us. So helping people rewire that part of their brain to really believe that their body is capable of this can be a really powerful way to help them, not only day to day, but to access care and to advocate for themselves. Because if you don't believe that you deserve this care, then it's really hard to advocate for it. So it's lots of different parts of the puzzle, putting them together alongside a good dollop of like research and evidence to really help people build those evidence banks that they are capable and that the evidence supports that, just to give them all the tools that they need to navigate this.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's I really appreciate you breaking down your process, and I love how there's such a strong focus on trusting yourself and believing in your body, right? And looking for evidence that contradicts all the things that they've been told. That's a really powerful approach. So, what's a first step someone might be able to take if they're in this situation and feeling very hopeless and not sure what to do? Where can they start?
So the first thing that I often recommend folks work on is giving themselves permission. So for so many people, we give ourselves this like, oh, well, I can't do this until I've lost weight. I can't do this until I'm in a smaller body. And I would love to invite people to give themselves permission to try now, to not wait longer, to not put it off, to not, believe that they don't deserve this. Like, I 100% believe if you are listening to this, you absolutely deserve everything that you need in order to get pregnant and to grow your family. And I would love for you just to give yourself that little bit of permission to go, maybe it is okay that I do this now. Maybe I don't have to wait until I've gone and tried another diet or done another thing or made my body smaller. Like, maybe it's okay.
Oh, that hit me right in the heart, because I can see how someone would start to believe that they don't deserve to have the family that they want to have, and the desires that are on their heart, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that is such a powerful statement. Tell us a little bit about your book. You have a book that you published called Fat and Fertile. Tell us a little bit about what's in it and what people can gain from reading it.
So I wrote it about 4 years ago now, and I was just so sick of there not being any books out there for fat folks. Every fertility book out there, all we are is a little side note saying that you need to be a quote unquote healthy weight if you want to get pregnant. So if your BMI is over this, then you need to lose weight. And it just felt so sad to me that our whole experience as folks in bigger bodies was just summed up by a small paragraph of, you're wrong, your body is wrong, you need to lose weight, just affirming all of this rubbish, which, the doctors tell us. So it felt really important for me to make something that was accessible to people. And so I wrote a book, and it is self-published. It is something that's very much a labor of love. It is very rough around the edges, shall we say. I would love to give it another good edit. I would love to have a little time to rewrite it. But for me, it was so much more important to have something out there for people to be able to have something that mirrors their experience, that speaks to them, that can empower them to actually feel like they're not alone, because so often we don't talk about this stuff, and so often, especially for fat folks navigating this, you don't want to share it because you're worried that people will judge you or shame you or make you feel bad for even wanting to have a family. So I kind of described it as like a hug in a book. It is lots of my experiences, lots of the coaching techniques that I use, some of the research that I had back then. Obviously, I've got so much more of it now, but it was really just a starting point for folks to be able to realize that there are other people navigating this, validating their, experiences, just something for them to be able to hold on to in those moments where it felt hopeless. They felt there was nobody that understood them, nobody knew what they were going through, and that they were all alone. And I've had some really, really lovely feedback on it. Like some, people saying that, not only that it helped them, but, that it helped them grow the family that they wanted. So it was definitely a worthwhile investment of my time. Even though I'd love to do so much more with it, it is, definitely.
You know what? They always say done is better than perfect, right? And
it's a thing.
And, as our coach always says, you can't hold yourself back, like waiting to have everything polished and perfect. You have something valuable to offer into the world, so get it out there, right? Like,
absolutely. And I can't agree more with that. I feel for, for everybody who's working through this, like fertility stuff, we have such a high expectation that we put on ourselves, right? Of doing things perfectly, of the right supplements, the right nutrition, the right movement, like all of this needs to be perfect. And, your future baby doesn't care about you doing it perfectly. They just want you to look after yourself. And I think, I take that into every area of my life, no matter what it is, so far beyond my work is just like trying things and seeing how they work and doing a little bit. Like every tiny step is valuable and useful. Even if you don't do it forever, like it doesn't matter, like it still counts.
For sure. 100%. Right. And once you become a parent, you realize that there is no perfection. And
perfection goes out the window. I'm not
it's always doing your best and rejigging things and learning and growing and, so yeah. Okay, so as we wrap up, is there anything final that you want to say? What would you want someone who's on this journey of struggling with fertility, what would you want them to know?
I think the most important thing that I'd want them to know is that they're not alone. that there are other people who are going through this. Even if you never find them talking about it on forums or on the internet, there are other people navigating these exact same things. Mm-hmm. And, you know, your experiences are totally valid. And that it's so understandable that you're experiencing it this way and you're feeling the way that you are. But that you don't have to make your body smaller in order to get pregnant. And that you are so worthy of getting any help and care that you need in order to reach that goal right now. Like, you're not broken. You don't need fixing. There's nothing that you need to change right now.
I love that. I love that. Okay, I know that our listeners are going to get so much value out of this episode, and they're going to want to follow along with you and your work. So where can everybody connect with you and keep in touch?
So I'm mainly on Instagram, and my handle is Fat Positive Fertility. So you can find me there. I also share kind of all the resources and things that I have on my website, which is nicolasalmon.co.uk.
Wonderful. Nicola, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today and share your wisdom about fertility and weight stigma in this field. And I know it's going to just be so valuable for those who are listening. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. This has been such a joy.
Thanks for tuning into the Power in Motion podcast today. If you love what you're learning here, then I invite you to take the next step of embodying these concepts into your own life so that you can live your healthiest, happiest life and never again feel held back by your body. Coaching is the fastest, most efficient pathway to taking what you know in your head to actually applying it and seeing results. Whether you're looking to make changes around movement, food, body image, or all three, I'm here to help you nurture a kind, respectful, and trusting relationship with your body so you can feel your very best. Click the link in the show notes to book a free consultation, and together we'll uncover what's getting in the way of you having the results you want. You'll leave this call knowing exactly what you need to work on, and together we'll explore whether one of my coaching offers is a good fit for you. I can't wait to meet you.